have to write an autobiography, and my teacher told us to start with our birth and put in all the important things that happened to us. Moving from Texas to Wisconsin and being adopted is important, but I don't want to write about that. Would it still be an autobiography if I leave stuff out? We're supposed to write a research paper on the country where our ancestors came from. My teacher said I should write about Colombia because that's where I was born. But I'd rather write about Poland, where Grandpa came from. Why does everyone think I'm only interested in Colombia?
Well, my teacher says we have to bring in a baby picture, and we'll guess who matches each picture. But I'm the only Asian kid in my class. How's that fair?
Hi, I'm Mary Grosnickel from the Coalition for Children, Youth, and Families. The coalition serves as an umbrella over adoption and foster care in Wisconsin. We offer information, training, and support to families and to professionals like you. The statements you heard are typical comments from children who are frustrated by assignments they just can't do because they were adopted or are in foster care or living with grandparents or another relative who's not a biological parent. Sometimes those frustrations and feelings of sadness show up as disruptive behaviors in the classroom. As educators, you know that your students come from diverse backgrounds, right? Students come from different ethnic, racial, and cultural backgrounds, and they also come from varied family situations. You might have children who are in blended families with a step-parent, children with a single mom or dad, or two moms or two dads, and you may have children in your class who are part of an adoptive or foster family, or living with grandparents or other relatives. Family-based assignments can be difficult for those students. Assignments like autobiographies, family trees, family histories, and lessons that focus on genetics or heredity, or ask them to bring in family photos, may exclude some students because those assignments ask them to come up with information that's missing, incomplete, or just quite different from their peers. So what can you do to help? We know that as educators, you are the best advocates for all children in your classrooms. One way to be an advocate for your students is to be aware of which assignments might bring up feelings of sadness or loss for children who were adopted, are in foster care, or are living with a relative who's not the biological parent. While these assignments might not be emotionally difficult for a majority of your students, if you know that an assignment might be hurtful or embarrassing to any students, and if it can be easily modified, we know you'd want to make the change. So let's talk about a few of those assignments and some alternatives that would work better for many students while still meeting the educational goals that you've set. At different grade levels, children or youth may be asked to write an autobiography. This can be difficult for children who have experienced traumatic events in their lives, such as abuse or neglect, or for children who have witnessed domestic violence, drug use, or alcohol abuse. Imagine trying to write about your life when these are the events that come to mind. And some children might not have any knowledge of their early years, or there could be big gaps in the information they know about their lives. As an alternative to a standard autobiography, you might consider asking students to choose a specific time span to write about, rather than writing about their lives from birth on. Maybe they could write about when I was younger or my life in the past year. Some teachers let students research a famous person and then write a biographical sketch from the viewpoint of the famous person, using the first person I to get a flavor of an autobiography. Obviously, the way you broaden an assignment depends on the learning objective. A similar assignment is creating a timeline of the student's life. A student may wonder if it's okay to leave out some milestones like leaving their birth family, foster care stays, or adoption finalization. As with the autobiography, you might allow students to create a timeline for any period of time they want, or to create a timeline for a famous person, real or fictional. Another troublesome assignment is to bring in a baby picture. Many children who were adopted or who are in foster care simply don't have a baby picture. This could put some of your students in the uncomfortable position of explaining why they don't have a picture to bring in. So you could broaden this assignment by asking your students to bring in a picture from any time when they were younger. Or you could ask them to bring in a photo of themselves doing an activity they like or a photo with a special person in their life. Sometimes the baby picture assignment is used in a lesson about how we change and grow, and students are asked to match a baby picture with a student in the class. A student who has a different racial or ethnic background from most or all of the other students, maybe because of an international or transracial adoption, will be pretty easy to match with his or her baby picture. One way to broaden this assignment is to have students use word clues or magazine pictures to show what has changed in their lives. And maybe the change could be over any time period, like what has changed in school since last year. The type of books they read certainly has changed over the years. Changes in growth could be represented by looking at baby and adult birds or animals, and you can probably think of a lot of other ways to offer flexibility to students. Sometimes the baby picture or any family photos are part of a Student of the Week activity. This is a fun activity for many students, but can be uncomfortable for students who don't have easy access to family photos or who have painful memories of family times. You might consider having a list of options to choose from that students could include to help the rest of the class get to know them better. Things like what they like to do after school, their favorite foods, their favorite sports team, and so on. These things could be drawn or cut out from a magazine, and so it would be easier for students who don't have a lot of photos to share. Special days, such as Mother's Day or Father's Day, can be hard for students who don't live with their birth parents. You might give the option of making multiple gifts or cards. That way, a student wouldn't be forced to choose one parent if they have both birth and foster or adoptive parents in their lives. And for special occasions, such as father-son or mother-daughter events, you might suggest that all students could think about a special person or important caregiver and could honor that person if they choose to. Even birthdays, usually a day we think of as a happy day, can often be a trigger for sad memories of birthdays past for a child who has been in foster care. Or for children who are adopted, it can bring up emotional questions like, I wonder if my birth mother thinks of me on my birthday. If you typically celebrate birthdays in the classroom, and you know you have a student who was adopted or is in foster care, you could consider asking the student's parents or caregivers for suggestions on how to celebrate this special day. Some students might prefer not to celebrate at all. I was reminded of a letter written by a young teen to Dear Abby. The writer talks about being adopted and then says, "My birthday is sad, and I would like to be left alone. Last year's birthday was horrendous. I burst into tears at a restaurant, and I would not like a repeat." For this child, celebrating at school wouldn't be fun at all. Family trees can be difficult for many students. Students in foster care may not have all the information needed to fill in their family tree, and students who are adopted might have trouble deciding which family to include, their birth family or their adoptive family, on a typical family tree that only has room for one family. There are lots of alternatives to the usual family tree assignment. For younger children, a caring tree might work well, where the child places his or her name on the trunk and the names of people who care about me on the branches. A family wheel works in the same way, where the child is in the middle and the outer rings show other family connections. A common alternative is a tree with branches and roots. Students who have foster, adoptive, or step families can put their birth family names on the roots. Some teachers use family houses instead of a family tree to show connections between birth, foster, adoptive, or step family members. For older students, you might use a genogram, which is a tool that illustrates family relationships, and it has special symbols to show those relationships. In middle school or junior high, many students study genetics. You can probably see how that could be difficult for some students. It might bring up feelings of grief and loss as students think about where their biological family is right now. And if you ask students to look at their family members and see where their eye color or height came from, this may be troublesome for a student who won't see anyone who looks like him or her. And it's possible that the student wouldn't want to come to class and talk about how they don't look like anyone else in their family. You could consider broadening the assignment to let students choose any biologically related group. Their parents and grandparents, if they're biologically related, neighbors whose children they know, friends' families, famous families, and so on. If you ask students to research their cultural or ethnic background, you might find that children or youth who were adopted would rather investigate their adoptive family's heritage. Perhaps the assignment could be to investigate any culture a student is interested in, rather than the one based on their family. You could probably list some other areas that could be difficult for children in foster care or who were adopted. Sometimes it won't be practical or even suitable to change the assignment, but just knowing that a subject might bring up some emotional responses for some students will help you to be prepared to support them. There are other ways to be an advocate for children who don't live with their biological parents. You can be there to help a child who's asked a question about his or her family situation. Maybe a question that's difficult to answer or the child just doesn't want to answer. Or a student might be teased about their family situation. Children sometimes hear questions like, "Why didn't your real mom keep you?" or "Why don't you look like your mom?" You can step in and help the child or youth just as you would if you heard any type of teasing or inappropriate questions about race, culture, or divorce. If you hear an inappropriate question from another student, this can become a teachable moment. You can model appropriate positive language when referring to adoption, kinship care, and foster care. We have a list of positive language on the Coalition's website, but let me give you a few examples of respectful and non-judgmental language. Rather than referring to a child or youth as a foster child, it's more respectful to say a child or youth in out-of-home care. This puts the child first rather than the description first and is less likely to feel like a label. A child who has been adopted has not been given away or put up for adoption. Instead, this child's birth parents made an adoption plan or they've experienced a termination of parental rights. And saying a child was adopted is preferable to saying the child is adopted. Adoption is a one-time event, not a definition of a person. So I would say I was adopted rather than I am adopted. This is a subtle but powerful difference. Sometimes children who were adopted are asked about their real parents. It would be more accurate to refer to their biological parents or birth parents because all their parents are real, right? And children who are adopted and who have siblings are real brothers and sisters. I'm sure their parents would tell you there's nothing fake about them. And if an issue does come up, the parents will always want to know about it. Even if the child appears to be handling the situation well, there may be a meltdown at home, and the parents may be clueless about the cause. A quick call or an email from you would give the parents a heads up about a potentially emotional situation. And this also would give the parents a good opportunity to open a discussion at home. We hope this information will help you to respond to your students in the way we know you always do, with compassion, understanding, and the desire to make school a positive experience for all your students. Please visit our website for a list of resources and more information about adoption and foster care. Or give us a call. We're here to help.